Hare Krishna. Glad to have you here tonight, broadcasting straight from the center of the universe in Alachua, Florida. When Prabhupada came here, he said, this far distant place. Now it's become more like the center of Krishna consciousness in America. So we had a wonderful show last week because for really the first time we spoke about things that we do when we're not chanting that affect our chanting. And we focused on how we treat devotees. And I ended the show by saying that we need to appreciate devotees, otherwise there's a tendency to criticize, and that tendency will damage our Krishna consciousness, damage our ability to chant. And one thing I didn't mention that's really important is that, we hear that we should appreciate devotees, we hear we shouldn't criticize, and sometimes we see that as kind of a sadhana, a process. Well, that will help my bhakti, which is true. But one thing which we're not always aware of, which is important to understand, is that by appreciating devotees, our heart becomes purified. That ill feelings for those devotees become minimized or practically completely destroyed by appreciating them. And you can try this in your own life. You just try appreciating devotees, and then you'll see that actually it changes your heart. Particularly, the devotees we need to appreciate are the ones that we find difficult to appreciate. And it will actually change your heart. It's amazing. So, to blaspheme devotees is one of the 10 offenses to the holy name. Patanjali said that in order to control the mind, counteract it by opposites. So if there's a tendency to think one way, you counteract it by thinking totally the opposite way, even if that's not natural for you. So maybe if you find a tendency to be critical, then you counteract that by what? By doing what? By appreciating. Finding something good to say about someone that you don't think you can find anything good to say about. I did a seminar and we asked people, find somebody, think of someone who's hurt you. And then at a certain point in the seminar we said, say something good about that person. And this one person was visiting. This was just a couple-hour program. It was his first time visiting Krishna consciousness anyway. So we came to him and I said, so can you say something good about the person who hurt you? He said, I can't say anything good. There's nothing good about them. So obviously that's not true. And I said, is that absolutely 100% true that there's not one thing good about that person? But he was so upset he couldn't think of anything at that point. But there's always something good about everyone. And that is how Srila Prabhupada taught us to deal with one another. So I just wanted to add that point from last week. I don't know if I made it clear that appreciation is actually a process of purification. It's not just a process of protecting yourself from committing offense, but it actually purifies the heart, and if you do that, you can actually experience a change of heart. There's another thing I wanted to discuss, which I've discussed previously, but I wanted to bring it up again and illustrate it a little more because it's an important principle. And we had talked many, many weeks ago, probably months ago, we talked about sacred space. And when we talk of sacred space, we often talk of an external space in which we're chanting. We call it sacred because it's an environment which helps us chant. We want to chant in a conducive environment, so we call that sacred, as opposed to an environment which is detrimental, where you're distracted, where you can't focus, or an environment that makes you apathetic to your chanting. And we also spoke a little bit, but not entirely, about the internal sacred space. And what's the internal sacred space? The internal sacred space is what's going on in our minds, in our hearts. And I wanted to illustrate one example of this. And it's kind of a funny example, but I think it's typical. This is an example of a couple. And often what you find is that when a couple's been together a while, even maybe not even a while, they come together for breakfast. And so the wife or the girlfriend is serving breakfast, and what is the man doing? And can anybody guess what he's doing? Take a guess, somebody. What is he doing? Often, what does the man do during breakfast? Should I tell you? You don't know? Anyone in the studio audience know? This is a mystery. He reads a newspaper. Yes, MLA, Davy, it's a woman, so she ought to know. He reads the newspaper. And what do you do as the wife? You are what? You are talking to him, and he's behind the newspaper. And every once in a while you get a few words out of it. And after a while you get exasperated and you say something like, when I'm talking to you, can you just not read the newspaper? Like, I'm right here, like I'm your wife and I'm talking to you, and can you give me attention, and can we just talk? Can you read the newspaper some other time? Do you have to read it now while I'm talking to you? MLA Devi Dasi. Is that true? Or is that true? Yes, it's true, right? You would say something like that, right? Can we talk? I'm talking to you. Can you look at me? So I was thinking that a similar thing, we need to do a similar thing when we're chanting. And what is the newspaper? What does the newspaper represent? Well, the newspaper can represent different things for different devotees. For some devotees, the newspaper may represent their computer. For some devotees, the newspaper may represent what they have to do today. For some devotees, the newspaper may represent creativity, thinking about creative things they can do. For each of us, that newspaper, which is the distraction from the relationship with the holy name, represents something else. So creating internal space is very important, because what we're doing when we create internal spaces, we're creating a, should we say, just as the husband tells the wife, okay, I promise, when we have breakfast, I'm not going to read the newspaper. When we have dinner together, I'm not going to read the newspaper. I'm going to be here present for you. I'm going to be focused totally on you and the conversation. And the wife's happy. Yes, thank you. That's what you need to do. So similarly, when we're chanting the holy name, we need to do the same thing. We need to tell Krishna the same thing. Krishna, when I'm chanting your name, I'm going to focus on you. I'm not going to focus on my computer, my email, what I have to do today, what I didn't finish yesterday, new ideas about this and that. I'm not going to do any of that. And we have this Paragovinda Das where he's praying to his mind, but I'm not really referring here to praying to the mind or making commitment with yourself. And the reason I'm not is because we're dealing here with a relationship with Krishna, and the commitment really needs to go to Krishna. You know well when you make commitments to yourself what happens. Generally 50%, 40-50% of the time, when we commit to ourselves, we don't keep it. But when we commit to others, we keep it probably 70, 80, 90, 100% of the time. So if we make an internal commitment and say, well, in order to create my sacred space, I'm going to make an internal commitment to be focused on the holy name and not focused on other things. I don't think that's good enough. I think you should make that commitment to Krishna, because he's agreeing to come when we chant, so you should make it to him. Krishna, this is my newspaper. It's this, that. The newspaper represents these other things. I commit to you when I chant, that newspaper goes down, I'm with you totally. And I've done that, and it has amazing effects on being able to focus on the holy name. One of the biggest problems, we've talked about this many, many times, one of the biggest problems that comes up with all of us when we chant is what? I can't control my what? My tongue? No. My eyes? No. My ears? No. I can't control my sense of touch when I chant. I have to go touch things. No. So I can't control my what? My mind. MLA Devi Dasi is on top of it tonight. I can't control my mind. What's happening? I'm not listening. Krishna's coming in the presence of it, in the form of his name. I'm not listening. If you make this commitment to the holy name, my dear holy name, when I'm chanting your name, when I'm chanting Japa, I'm there for you, I'm with you. The newspaper is down. It's you are there present in the holy name, and I'm there present with you. That's it. And if you can't do that, stop chanting. That's what I do. If it gets so bad, I got to come back to this chanting. Krishna, I can't give you my attention now. There's too many things going on. The phone's ringing off the hook. I know who's calling. He needs me now. Okay, I'm going to stop. Take care of my business, whatever. And when I come back to chanting, that's it. I'm with Krishna. My attention is there. So why is this important? It's important because so many times we try to control our mind and we find it extremely difficult. This is a fantastic way to control the mind. You've committed to Krishna that you're going to do this. And you remember that commitment, and every time you chant, you remember that commitment. Krishna, I made this commitment to you. This is our relationship. This is our time. This is what I'm going to do. It's powerful. It really works if you do it. It helps you tremendously control your mind. And what happens when your mind wanders? Immediately you remember, oh Krishna, I made this commitment. My internal sacred space means I'm freeing that space up from these other things that are going to get in the way of my relationship with you in the form of your holy name. I'm clearing those things out. Just like if you're there with your wife, you come home from work and there's a zillion things on your mind, but you have to be present for her. What do you have to do? You have to clear those things out so you can be present with her. She wants you to be there. You're not at work anymore, you're at home. She wants you to be there with her, with the family. So it's the same thing with Japa. You have to clear all these things out. Now you're with Krishna. Clear that stuff out, it'll be there later. You don't have to worry about it. Very important. That's internal sacred space. And you can do other things in your eternal sacred space. Another thing that I haven't talked about, which is important, is that chanting, we often don't take chanting as a meditation. We're not going deep in our meditation. I told this story that I had written a letter to Prabhupada. And I asked him, is it better to think of Krishna constantly, or is it better to do more service? And Prabhupada, because I felt if I was very busy I couldn't think of Krishna. Prabhupada wrote me back, he said, the whole point of everything is to think of Krishna, not to think of Krishna, to be absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. To be absorbed. Not think, but absorbed. That's the whole point. Sometimes when Prabhupada would engage devotees, he'd say, I'm giving you all these big projects because you're so passionate, you have to run around, but still the ultimate goal is that we just sit down and chant 24 hours a day, but you can't do that. So the ultimate goal is to be absorbed. The ultimate goal is to think of Krishna. That's it. Often when we chant, we don't get absorbed in thinking of Krishna. We don't go deep. We don't bring Krishna within our heart. So another way you can create sacred space is this wonderful meditation. If I'm going to bring Krishna in my heart in the form of the holy name, I have to get everything out of my heart that's dirty. Otherwise, how can I bring Krishna? You're going to bring Krishna to a dirty place? You can't. I was in Los Angeles when Rukmini Dwarkadish were being installed. So what they did is they had a platform in the middle of the temple, and they brought a rug to put on the platform. The problem was everybody had been walking in on that rug for the last year. It was just a rug we used in the temple. When Prabhupada saw that, he became furious. He was sitting on his Vyasasana and he said, you're putting God on that rug? He was so angry. He said, how can you put God on that dirty rug? So it's the same thing when we're chanting. Think, okay, sometimes I meditate on the holy name in the form of words. Just I see the mantra and I think, okay, I'm going to bring that mantra into my heart. And I envision within my heart there's a throne, and I'm going to place the Maha Mantra, those words, on this throne. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm placing these words on this throne in my heart. I got the throne built, but I have to clean the throne. So all my thoughts of lust, of any other desire other than bhakti, I have to get out. And so it's such an impetus if you do this meditation. I want to meditate deeply on Krishna in the form of his holy name. You can meditate on your favorite deity, your favorite picture, and imagine bringing that into your heart. And Krishna's going to sit there in this sacred space in your heart, but you're going to clean it out of all these other things. Now, why is this important? It's important because in Jaiva Dharma it says offensive chanting means to chant the name of Krishna with some material aspiration. So if we're holding on to some, a lot of times we chant, oh Krishna, my economic position is not good, Hare Krishna, can you do something about it? Krishna, Krishna, Ram, Ram. How about $1,000 next week? Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. You know, these thoughts are going through. My marital, I'm not married. Krishna, can you do something about that? Hare Krishna, Ram, Ram. How about this one, that one? Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Krishna, I'm married. I don't like her. Can you do something about that? Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. So, this job, I'd rather have this job. Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. I'd rather to do good on this test. Krishna, Krishna, Hare. So, there's all these things going on. I don't feel good. My mother doesn't feel good. The doctor, we're doing all this kind of praying. And Jaiva Dharma says, that's actually namaparad. And we think, well, isn't it proper to pray to Krishna? Doesn't the Bhagavatam say whether you're full of desires, have no desires, you should pray to Krishna? It says Whether you're full of desires or no desires, you should engage fully in Krishna consciousness. That's what it says. In other words, you may have those desires. Don't pray to Krishna. Don't use the holy name to fulfill those desires. So, we're bringing the holy name into the throne, into this internal space. We have to remove those desires from that internal space. Clean that throne. Okay, I'm going to drop these motives. The motive of bringing the holy name is simply to worship Krishna. I'm worshiping Krishna in the form of the Maha Mantra. I'm cleaning this altar of lust, desire, greed, anger, all these things. It's interesting, so often I know from myself and I know from other devotees that often when we're chanting, we're getting distracted and we're actually praying to Krishna for things other than bhakti, or we might think it's related to bhakti. In some way, of course, we could probably relate everything to bhakti. But that's namaparad, to chant Krishna's name with some material motive, asking Krishna for something material. My experience is this, personal experience. When you don't ask Krishna for anything and you just say, Krishna, let me be an instrument in your service. That's all I pray for. Your material life will end up being much, much better than it is now. Much, much better. Because you have that, you're putting your faith. Okay, Krishna, I'm just praying for bhakti. I have faith. If I give myself to you, if I become an instrument, you'll somehow or other manage. I mean, not that I don't make an endeavor, but you'll manage to take care of me. I just want to be an instrument. And I only pray for that. That's the meaning of the Maha Mantra. I'm praying for pure bhakti. If the Maha Mantra means to pray for pure bhakti, then it's aparad to be asking for something that isn't pure bhakti. So it's a wonderful meditation. It kind of forces us to eliminate all these unwanted contaminations within our heart if we envision bringing Krishna into our heart in the form of the visually seeing the Maha Mantra, or in the form of a favorite deity, a favorite picture, and just chanting Hare Krishna and meditating. Just, chanting is a meditation. Sometimes we can meditate on being in the holy dham, being in a holy place, even visioning the pastimes. Now, someone might say, well, isn't that artificial? This is my answer to isn't that artificial. You could say, in the conditioned state when we come to Krishna consciousness, everything's artificial. Until you have a spontaneous attraction, everything's artificial, except maybe eating prasadam, because we have a spontaneous attraction to that. Is chanting Hare Krishna artificial? The first time you chant Hare Krishna, if you've ever chanted 16 rounds, first time you chanted 16 rounds, difficult. For most of us, it was difficult. I didn't feel like it. It was artificial. Getting up, before I became a devotee, I was going to college. I was going to bed at 3 in the morning, getting up at 11 in the afternoon. I moved in the temple. I was getting up at 4 o'clock. That was totally artificial. That was the most artificial thing I ever did in my life. They wake me up at 4 and I go, it's the middle of the night. You can't wake me up. It's the middle of the night. That was artificial. Everything was artificial. I had to do it. Everything was artificial. So, isn't it artificial, to try to envision the holy places or bring the deity in our heart? It's a practice. It's meditation. Prabhupada said, become absorbed in thoughts of Krishna. What does it mean to become absorbed in thoughts of Krishna? It means to think of his pastimes, to think of his words, to think of his form. So, I wouldn't say that is artificial. I would say that it's part of the process. And the point I'm making is that it forces us to clean our heart out. How can I bring Krishna into a dirty place? I can't. Prabhupada was furious. You can't put Krishna on that dirty rug. When we go on the altar to worship the deities, we clean the altar. We clean the floor. We clean the deities. Everything. Put water on the clothes, put water on the jewelry. Everything has to be clean. So, we think, why isn't my chanting good? We're inviting Krishna in. We're bringing Krishna into our heart. We're inviting him into our heart. Prabhupada once said, chanting is like putting Krishna on a diamond throne and offering flowers. We're worshipping Krishna in the form of his holy name. Krishna is coming to dance on our tongue. Whose tongue will he dance on? Whose tongue will he appear on? Those who are pure. Then you may say, well, I'm not pure. That's okay. Be pure. control those desires. Do what you can to bring Krishna into a clean place in your heart. You can do much more to control yourself. You really can. So, I don't know if I'm talking about chanting with feeling. It's a broader subject here. But I wanted to bring those two things in, because we've talked about them before, but you may not have seen those broadcasts, and I have not gone that deeply. So we're here talking about internal sacred space. It's so important what's going on internally within us. It's a major effect on our chanting. One of the things that I've seen over and over again is how easy it is to become distracted and apathetic when we chant. And that's why I'm emphasizing that chanting is a meditation. When we become apathetic and distracted, it's not a meditation at all. It's very much an unconscious activity. Meditation is very conscious. It's something very deep. And the relationship we have with Krishna, it's very deep. So that meditation, it's kind of like when you're chanting in this deep meditation, you're pondering that relationship and what it means and how significant a relationship that is. That kind of meditation should be going on when we're chanting, and that how much you want that relationship to develop and how much you need it and how vital it is in your life. That's what should be going on when we're chanting. Krishna, I need you. I want you. This relationship is vital. If we're feeling that this relationship is vital, then when we're chanting, we're going to chant in a vital way. We're going to chant in a dependent way. We're going to chant in a prayerful way. Because I need this relationship. We're going to be begging Krishna, please allow me to have this relationship, even though I'm so unqualified. That is the proper way to chant. And so my point is, if we bring that consciousness into our chanting, then it's unlikely we're going to be distracted. It's so easy to be distracted, but it's at least less likely to be distracted. When I travel a lot, and when I travel, I stay with devotees, so I get to chant with them in the morning. And of course, when I travel, I stay in different temples, and I get to chant with a lot of devotees. And so I just see, not only I see them, and I see from my own experience, so many years of chanting, that becoming distracted is I would say it's kind of a default position unless we are endeavoring to do something about it. It's we've been defaulted on the distracted, apathetic level. So, devotees want to know, well, how do I deal with it? And so I'm saying, by being meditative, by really bringing Krishna deeply into our chanting, into the process, and feeling the relationship. Feeling, as I said before, and I want to say this again because this is so important. So, if you haven't been paying attention, if you're half asleep, if you're distracted, if you're talking to someone, stop right now and listen to this. It's really important. One of the things we teach in the very beginning of our Level 1 Japa workshop, which resonates with devotees very deeply, everybody resonates with this, is this one principle. Chanting is not just a process. It's a what? Tell me, someone who's listened to this broadcast. Chanting is not just a process, it's a, who knows? Even if you haven't listened, you might understand. It's a, what is it? Who knows? Tell me. It's a, there seems to be a difference in video and audio. Oh, anyway, what can we do? Can you do something?
He's just noticing that the mouth is slightly differently.
The mouth is...
We're broadcasting at 6 frames per second.
Yeah, we're broadcasting 6 frames per second, so... I'm speaking and then you're hearing? Anyway, Rasa Rasika, yes, he knows. It's a relationship. Yeah, Damodar. So chanting is not just a process, it's a relationship. So why is that important? Well, if you think about a process, what is your relationship to a process? That's very interesting, because it's so important, and this is so helpful. What is our relationship to a process? There's a total different relationship to a process than there is to a person, isn't it? Because a process is What if you have a bad relationship with a process? That's not such a, well, I have a bad relationship with a process. Well, I don't do the process. That's such a bad thing. I don't do the process well. I'm supposed to practice my piano. I don't do it well. It's not like the piano says, why don't you play me nicely? Why don't you love me? No. So sometimes we look at chanting like a process, like it's a piano. Well, I don't do the process well. If we stop looking at it just as a process and look at it as a relationship, it all changes. Krishna's there in his name. It's all about relationship. So if I don't do the relationship well, it sounds a lot different than if I don't do the process well. Right? Well, I don't do the process, so I suffer today. No, it's more than that. There's a relationship. So as I was talking, that we're yearning for this relationship, we're hankering. And if we bring that into our consciousness, that there's a relationship there, that Krishna is present, it really changes everything when you're chanting. Because now, Krishna's there, and I'm relating to him. And therefore, I'm not supposed to be thinking anything else, getting preoccupied with anything else. And I'm supposed to be giving what? Feeling. When there's a relationship, what do you give? You reciprocate. So Krishna is there reciprocating in his holy name. How is Krishna reciprocating his holy name? It is said, which you've probably heard, that the holy name is more merciful than Krishna himself, because even if we offend Krishna, we can be free from that offense by chanting his holy name. So the holy name is so merciful. So, we should feel, oh Krishna, you're coming to me. You're so merciful. You're so kind. I want this relationship. I want to make that relationship closer, better. So, that's what I wanted to say as an introduction. That was a 27-minute introduction. But that was kind of a recap, going a little deeper. So just, stamp that one on your forehead tomorrow morning, or stamp it on your forehead, wear a garland that says, chanting is a relationship, not just a process. How are you doing with your relationship with the Holy Name? How are you doing? Prabhu, how's your relationship with the Holy Name been going? Do you have a good relationship with the Holy Name? Do you love him? Do you neglect him? Does he get priority in your life? Is he third on your list? Do you give him attention? Are you, when you chant, are you inattentive to him? Do you ignore him when you chant? Oh, really? You ignore him when you chant? Well, you must have a really bad relationship with him if you ignore him. Just like someone's talking to you and you ignore them. You must not care about that person. So if you think of the Holy Name as a person and start to relate to him and think, oh, I ignore Krishna while I'm chanting. Prabhu, that's not a nice thing to do to somebody, is to ignore them when they're coming to you. They're so kind to come to you in the form of their name, even though you don't deserve it, I don't deserve it, none of us deserve it, but they're kind enough to come to you, and you decide to ignore them. That's not very nice. How do you think they feel? This is what one of my godbrothers calls empathic theology. I don't know if I presented this to you. Empathic theology is when you do something you think, well, how does that make God feel? Do you ever think that way? I'm chanting and I'm ignoring Krishna. Well, how does that make him feel? We think, well, Krishna doesn't care. He's God, he's full of bliss. He doesn't care. He does care. We're chanting, of course, he's happy we're chanting. He's not happy that we're ignoring him while we're chanting. He's not happy that we're balancing our checkbook while we're doing Japa. He's not happy that we're multitasking. He's not happy that we're doing our email while we're chanting. I hope he's happy you're watching me. If he isn't, I'm in big trouble. So, anyway, when you relate to Krishna as a person, everything changes. Because now, oh, I'm dealing with a person here. I'm ignoring him. That's terrible. I'm supposed to be opening my heart to him. I'm supposed to be giving my attention to him. I'm supposed to be empathic. How does he feel? And how does Krishna feel when I give my heart to him? He feels good. That's what I'm supposed to do. That's how relationships work. So, I'm going to go on now. We'll stop here for a moment. If you have any questions on anything I've spoken of, ask now. And I'll wait a minute or so for you to ask. And then if you don't have any questions, then I'll go on and I'm going to read something which relates to this about being conscious. So we spoke about internal space. We spoke about absorption in thoughts of Krishna. We spoke about relationship. Putting down your newspaper representing all the things that distract you from chanting, and giving your attention to your, what? Your relationship with the holy name. How are you doing in your relationship with the holy name? What a great question to ask. You can write that down and post it on your wall. You can make a t-shirt, you can make wallpaper, you can do anything. Remind yourself, how am I doing in my relationship with the holy name? Okay, so it looks like I've answered all questions already, so we're going to go on. And I'm going to continue reading and commenting on an article I wrote called Confessions of a Japa Retreat Junkie. And the next section is entitled First Become Conscious, Then Become Krishna Conscious. This is a statement that Prabhupada made. First become conscious. It's amazing how many bad japa habits I have not confronted, even though I know how much these habits hurt me. They exist. I see them destroying my good japa, yet I ignore them. They have a tendency to somehow camouflage themselves in a way that says, I am here, but don't worry about me. And I believe them and think, okay, I won't confront you. Why? Am I afraid it will be too difficult or too much work to change? I must think it's less painful to change than to suffer the consequences of bad japa. I was forced to become fully conscious of these habits, confront them, and deal with them at the retreat. This was one of the best things I've ever done. If I didn't do this, I don't know how long these habits would have continued to undermine my potential for better japa. So, I'm going to cut to the chase here, and the essence of this, first become conscious, is something that I realized is extremely important for us to deal with. And this I call our japa at a default setting. Most of us, if not all of us, have a default setting. Now, what does default setting mean? It's kind of, our japa kind of peaks at a certain level, and it doesn't get any better, and it kind of remains within certain perimeters, a certain median. You could say on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe your japa is a 6, maybe it's a 4, some days a 5, some days a 3. So it tends to get stuck in what I call the default mode. It's kind of an automatic process. Every day when you begin to chant your rounds, you will probably find that one day you don't chant dramatically better than the previous day. That does sometimes happen. Maybe you've done some incredible service and something in your life changes which really helps your japa, or you get some special mercy, but generally that's not happening. Generally we have some default setting which stays within a certain level of chanting, and it tends to stay there for a very long time, for years. It sometimes even tends to get worse. So I think one of the reasons that this happens is that we don't step back and look at it and say, okay, why is my japa at this level? What am I doing that's keeping it at this default setting? So that would be the negative side. What are the things I'm doing, the negative things I'm doing? And then when we recognize those negative things, we can start to deal with them. I just recently written an article, and I may have spoken about this previously, but I'll speak about it again because it relates. And I just written an article on my website, www.tstrain.com, www.tstrain.com, stands for Touchstone Training, tstrain.com. I wrote an article called What's the Problem? And the basis of that article was that we often have problems that we don't confront, we don't acknowledge, or we don't want to acknowledge, or we're afraid to acknowledge for various reasons. We don't confront them. They just exist, and we go along with them. It's like the problem's just there, and we're more or less just, that's it. It's there, and it troubles me, it makes it difficult, and we just kind of don't deal with it. And my personal experience is that if we stand back and look at a problem, analyze it, look at how to deal with it, look at how it's affecting us, look at the consequences of it, just really massage the problem from different angles, and deal with it head on, and make a plan, how I'm going to get around this problem, how I'm going to confront it, how I'm going to deal with it, how I'm going to tame it, then generally what happens is the energy in that problem, the negative energy that's affecting us within that problem, it begins to subside and it becomes easier for us to deal with. And sometimes that problem actually goes away because of that, because we've actually confronted it. So the same thing is true, I believe, with Japa, that a lot of times we have this default position and we don't deal with it. It's just, that's what it is. It is what it is. And we leave it at that. And so what I'm saying here is, it's amazing that I carry so many bad Japa habits, and this little voice in my head says, it's okay, Mahatma, don't worry about them. Why worry? You can't do anything anyway, or they'll go away someday. You got better things to do than worry about your bad Japa habits. It's just, just the voice of Maya. Very cleverly makes me feel like, well, it's okay because I'm chanting. And maybe this is the best I can do. Maybe in the present condition or circumstances of my life, this is all I can do. Maybe I'm just too busy and too preoccupied with other things that can't be any better than this. This is as good as it gets. It's not true. It's not true at all. When you stand back and go, okay, this is a problem, I do this, or whatever it may be, I get up too late, or I get up too early and I'm half asleep when I chant. I nod out half the time when I chant. Or I don't chant in a sacred space, or I don't chant with feeling, or I don't plan. You know how we plan in our life to do so many things. I'm going to plan to go to India, I'm going to plan to do this, plan to get this job, plan to go to the school. But why don't you make a plan how to chant better japa? Great, it's a great thing to plan to do. Very few of us do that. Okay, I'm going to make a plan tonight. How can I chant better japa tomorrow? What's my plan? What's my strategy? So this is what I'm talking about. We have these bad habits, these things that have negative effects on our japa. We don't deal with them, and then we don't make plans how to improve. So that is, be conscious. And the biggest problem I see in this is that if we do recognize them, then we'll say, well, whatever. Don't say whatever. Don't ever say whatever. Never say whatever. Say, oh, this is a problem. Let me look at it. Let me deal with it. And if you do that, I'll give you a guarantee, 100% money-back guarantee, your japa will improve. You just look at what are the obstacles to better japa, and start dealing with them one by one, making plans how to chant better japa. You will be amazed at how good your japa will become just by doing that. You'll be amazed. Guaranteed. Money back. If it doesn't work, write me a letter. I'll send you, what will I send you? You just wasted 5 minutes. I'll send you 5 minutes back. You wasted 5 minutes listening to that, so I'll send you 5 minutes. I'll give you a tip how you can save 5 minutes, and that'll be your money back. Okay, any questions on that?
Rasa Rasika asked the question.
Oh, Rasa Rasika asked the question. Where? I don't see it. Can you read it? I don't see it. Or is it down further? I don't see it. What's the question? Where is it? Way back up?
No.
We're looking for the question.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to have disappeared.
Oh, your chat room hasn't refreshed.
Well, he could send it in again.
I can read it to you.
Okay, Manu's going to read me the question because I don't see it here.
One question about distraction. I've had this question a few times. He posted it again. In regards to chanting with other devotees, sometimes there can be a distraction. So the question I get is, do we continue to chant with other devotees because that's what Srila Prabhupada instructed, or do we chant alone to avoid being distracted? This is normally in relation to the temple room.
Yeah, so the question is that sometimes if you're chanting with devotees, you can get distracted. And he's asking, well, is it better to chant alone if we're getting distracted? Or is it better to chant in the temple? Okay, I'm going to tell a story. My general answer would be, for me personally, chant somewhere where you're not distracted. Sometimes people come in the temple and they chant very loudly and I can't focus. Or they're just chanting in a way that distracts me. So the last Japa retreat, this story illustrates the exact opposite of what I'm telling you. So hopefully you won't be totally confused after I tell you this. So at the last Japa retreat, there was a devotee there who was chanting very loudly, much more loudly than the other devotees. Because generally the Japa retreats, everyone chants softly. It's kind of one of the things that we learn, that you can chant very softly and you could be screaming inside, but chanting very like this: Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And if you chant very softly, sometimes it actually helps you focus. So a lot of devotees most devotees chant softly, most devotees chant sitting down. And this devotee is a bigger devotee, not really big, but big enough to have a loud voice. And a lot of people with loud voices don't realize they have loud voices. So he was chanting very loudly, and in the center where we were chanting, they have little rooms that come off the side. The building is round, and they have rooms that come off the side, so they stick out from the building. So I was getting distracted by him, so I went in this little room, so I could chant without listening, because he was chanting so loud, I was just listening to him, wasn't listening to myself. So after a minute, guess who comes in that little room? You guessed it. That very devotee who was chanting very loudly came in that room because he wanted to stretch. So he was like doing a little bit yoga asana just to stretch, because I think it must have been the 64 round day, because we've been sitting down a long time. So there I'm in, and I'm thinking, okay, Krishna, you just want me to focus on my chanting, despite whatever distraction is there. So now I've given you two answers. So that was, I would say, to answer your question, you could be in the temple and be distracted and think, well, this is a test, that I really have to focus. And try that, and ultimately, if that doesn't work, then go someplace where you can focus. There's a seminar, and one of the things they do in the seminar is in one exercise, they ask people a question. And they have to write the answer to the question. And it's a deep question. It's a seminar. I believe this seminar is on getting in touch with your mission in life. Why God put you on earth? What gifts did He give you, and how can you use them? And getting in touch with those gifts and seeing how to use them. So they ask some questions to help you get in touch. And so you have to do a lot of thinking about who you are, what gifts you have, what's your tendencies, what did you do as a kid, what did you like, and why did you like it? What's behind? What go deeper into in what you did as a kid? What does it mean? And so while they're doing that, the facilitators are talking on stage near the microphone, and it's totally distracting. They're actually talking just small talk about stupid things on purpose. And some people come up and say, "Can you stop talking? It's distracting." And their basic answer is that if you're actually, they just say, you're not absorbed in doing this assignment. He said, because if you're actually absorbed and going deeply, you wouldn't even hear us. You would tune us out totally. So that could be true in chanting. If we're actually absorbed, maybe we're just not absorbed enough, and maybe we would tune out the people who distract us. Sometimes I'm distracted by people who I don't think are chanting well. So it's the ultimate paradox, isn't it? That you're chanting your rounds, looking at someone and thinking, he's not chanting well. He should be chanting like this. The ultimate paradox. Krishna is the ultimate trickster. So I do that all the time because I teach so many Japa workshops. I'm overly conscious of what's wrong, and then I see people doing something wrong, and I'm totally distracted from my Japa by them doing something wrong. It's kind of like the idea that someone has a fault and it bothers you because you have that fault, and that's why it bothers you. So you get distracted by the fault that you really have when you see it in them, because you can't stand it in yourself, so you can't stand it in them. So sometimes we'll see a devotee doing something, a faulty form of japa, and we do it also, and we get distracted by it because we can't stand seeing someone else do what we do. because we don't like it in ourselves. So anyway, that would be my answer. I'm not saying that's absolute, but it's one way of looking at it. Did anyone else? I'm not. My chat is not refreshed, so I don't know if anyone asked anything. Mana will have to guide me. Are there more questions? Now I got a new computer. Okay. It doesn't seem like it, right? Oh, okay, Rasika has another question, so I have to turn my head this way. I still love you all. I'm not avoiding you or neglecting you, but my computer's over here. Okay? One question about distraction. I have had this question a few times. Oh, yeah, it's the same question. Oh, he asked it again. Oh, yeah, it's the same question he asked again. Okay. So, now. Let me see if there's any other points from this. Okay, yeah. The last point I made here is very interesting. That when we have a habit is defined as something that you're doing that you're not conscious of. Which is why dealing with our bad japa habits is sometimes a problem, because we're not conscious of them. So, one thing I'm asking you here is to try to be more conscious of them. Bring them into your awareness. The reality is that if we don't bring them into our awareness, it's likely that those habits will continue throughout our life. It's a scary thought, and we may think, well, how could that be? Because that's the nature of habits, that they need to be interrupted. So just keep that thought in mind, that if you have a bad japa habit or a group of bad japa habits, it's likely they'll continue unless you actually do something about them. I mean, look at any bad habit you have. Unless you deal with it, it's pretty much going to stay with you. And oftentimes, these habits stay with us because we don't even know we have them. So, people around us can see them, but we don't see them as well. Okay. Now, we're going to go to another topic. And this is an important topic which I addressed in one respect last week. It's about what we're doing when we're not chanting, how it affects our chanting. I spoke a few weeks ago, give a little recap, which I thought was very important. And I'm actually developing a seminar. I'm going to be writing an article this month about it, and I'm developing a seminar on this, which we could call Surrendering to Your Dharma. And surrendering to your Dharma is an interesting topic, because often when we think of surrender means to do something that I hate to do, and that's surrender. Find the thing that you find the most difficult thing you could possibly do, the thing that you just never want to do, and then you do that, and then you are surrendered. A lot of us look at surrender like that. It's just like the thing I would despise doing the most. Krishna's going to make me do that, then I'm surrendered. That may be true, but surrender means to accept Krishna's instructions and do what Krishna wants. And one of the things that Krishna wants us to do is being engaged according to our varna, or our qualities and our nature. So I had spoken a few weeks ago about discovering what inspires you in bhakti. And I said, it's better that we have a movement full of inspired devotees than a movement full of surrender devotees who are totally uninspired. But that's, of course, that concept of surrender that I gave is, I don't really define surrender that way at all. I say surrender to your Dharma. Where your gifts are, where your inspiration is, surrender to that. That's not really surrender, that's natural. So I was making the point that when we are connected with those aspects within ourselves, and we connect that to service, it becomes a great inspiration. We wake up thinking, can't wait to do this. That inspiration has a tremendously powerful effect on our chanting, because we're inspired. Inspired devotees will make inspired japa chanters. And then when inspired japa will give them more inspiration. It just works really well. Whereas uninspired, if we're not inspired, it has an effect on our chanting. So there's obvious connection between chanting and what we do outside of our chanting. And I stress so much to everyone I meet, connect with your mission, why Krishna put you here, connect with what inspires you, and do that in Krishna's service. And by that one thing, you'll see your chanting will improve. Just by connecting with that inspiration. What does it mean to be inspired? It means you can't wait to do this. You can't stop thinking about it. You have so much energy to do it. Do you ever have this experience where you have to do something you really don't want to do, and all of a sudden you become really tired? Start yawning? I'm sure you all have that experience, right? And do you ever have the experience where you're totally inspired about something, and it's like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, you can't even go to sleep, you're like wide awake, you're just thinking about it, you're working on it? That's the nature of inspiration. So that's what I'm talking about. Being involved in a service that gives you so much inspiration that you just want to keep doing it, and you never get tired of doing it. That will greatly impact your chanting in a positive way. So I'm going to talk about something else that impacts our chanting. What I do when I'm not chanting affects the quality of the rounds I will be chanting later. For example, when I am not for example, if I am critical of devotees or even of non-devotees, it will be more difficult to chant good rounds. If my mind is engaged in activities from morning to night that have nothing to do with Krishna, my attraction to chanting the next day will diminish. However, if I make an effort to be as Krishna conscious as possible during the day, my rounds the next day are easier to chant and more relishable. My activities today are linked to the quality of my japa tomorrow. One devotee told me that if he goes out and gives people the Mahamantra, his rounds are always better the next day. So the key here is my activities today are linked to the quality of my japa tomorrow. How many of you have ever had that experience?
A couple of people are responding.
That you do something in devotional service that it was a stretch for you to do, it was very inspirational, and the next day your rounds are they're like an automatic Class A rounds. It's like you're just watching your rounds and you don't even know what you're doing, and they're just incredible rounds. How many of you have that experience? Raise your hand. Oh, I can see you all. That's all of you. Oh, great. And have you ever done the opposite, where your whole day was a total Krishna conscious disaster, and the next day chanting your rounds was kind of like drinking sand? Oh, you all raise your hand. You all have that experience also, yeah. So just be conscious that what you're doing at every moment of every day is affecting you. And one really good meditation is to meditate on, what is my purpose in life? Am I here to enjoy this world, or am I here to serve Krishna? You think, well, that's really simple. I've heard that a zillion times. I know that. Yes, zillion's not a number. I've heard that a zillion times. It's an expression of speech, but it's not a number. I've heard that a zillion times. No, but let's look at it a little more. I am put on this earth. I am a devotee. So when I become a devotee, that means my mission now is what? My mission is not to enjoy other people. It's not to enjoy this world. It's nothing to do with that. My mission is how to serve Krishna in this life, how to perfect this life. That's my mission. So if you live your daily activities in that consciousness of mission, you'll find your chanting will be much better. If you forget your mission and you think, oh, I'm here to enjoy everything around me, although you may not consciously think that way, it's just going on. That's your predominant mode of operations, how to enjoy this and that. Your rounds, it's going to be harder. It's going to be much harder. So now we have questions. I'm going to go over here and read the question. It's a good point about, okay, let's read. Kirtan Das. Excellent point. The inspiration for me has come from association with devotees because my influence is strong. Yes, sometimes you see a devotee, just seeing that devotee inspires you. You see a devotee doing some service, you get inspired to do service. I want to be like that. Like Prabhupada said, the gopis think I want to be like the other gopis. She's doing better service. Yeah, very important. Yes?
Yeah, Purusha once shared that he sits across from people who are chatting really nicely because he looks at them and he gets inspired.
Jagapurush said he likes to sit across from people who chant nicely because by looking at them, he gets inspired. Yeah, he's thinking, yeah, I should be chanting like that person. I should be absorbed like that person. I have one meditation that sometimes comes to mind when I chant, and that's Prabhupada. I've described before that sometimes people would see Prabhupada chanting in the pre-ISKCON days in his room at the Radha Damodar temple, and they would look through the window or peek through the keyhole or crack the door open, and they would see Prabhupada chanting and crying. Sometimes I like to bring that meditation into focus when I'm chanting. Prabhupada is chanting and crying. He's so much in Krishna's presence and so much experiencing Krishna's beauty while he's chanting. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, well, why is he crying? He said, because he's chanting and he's seeing Krishna's pastimes. He's seeing them and he's laughing. And then Krishna goes away. And then he's crying because Krishna's left. So it's an inspiration. Yes. So now we're going to read from Rasa Rasika. It's a good point about performing service according to our nature. What about a situation where you are able to overcome that and perform service that is outside of your nature? Should we also aspire for that to make advancement? Yes and no. And I will say yes, because sometimes there are situations where we have to do what we have to do, be it our nature or not. But in terms of your entire life, if you try to live your life that way, at least for most people, it could be detrimental to your bhakti. You know, this definition of surrender, anukulasya sankalpa partikulasya bhajana. That means accept what's favorable and reject what's unfavorable. So one way of looking at that would be, I should accept what's favorable, and what's favorable is just to surrender, do the needful, even if I don't like it, even if it's difficult, even if it's not inspiring, even if it's totally against my nature. That would be surrender. But I would also say surrender means to do just the opposite, to find what is your nature and do that service which inspires you, because you will probably surrender more to Krishna. You will surrender more of your time, more of your mind, and more of your energy to do that. Plus, isn't that what Krishna told Arjuna? Act according to your nature. So isn't that our philosophy, that we should act according to our nature? So, I think surrender is one of the most misunderstood words, the way it's interpreted. And oftentimes surrender is kind of, we look at, for many of us who lived in temples, we would give instructions, to do things by somewhat fanatical 21-year-olds. I remember this. It was in Los Angeles. It must have been 1972 or 3, and it must have been 74. And these devotees are going out on traveling Sankirtan for a week or two. So they have this big box of peanuts and raisins. So I look at it, I go, well, that's a lot of peanuts and raisins. And you go, yeah, that's our breakfast and that's our lunch. And that's all they ate, was that box of peanuts and raisins was all they ate. So now you come to the Krishna consciousness movement, and you're going to go out on this traveling party, and you have to surrender to the guidance of the 21-year-old fanatics who are going to feed you peanuts and raisins for 10 days for breakfast, lunch, snacks, and dinner. So is that surrender? It might be surrender not to eat that, because you might come back with illnesses and mental problems from eating peanuts and raisins for 10 days. And you may not be able to give your full energy to Krishna. So sometimes we look at surrender in ISKCON as like, you just got to do what, this, person tells me to do, who may not be giving me the best advice at this particular point. So surrender doesn't mean to give up our intelligence. And so my point here is that, we can also, what you say is true, but we can also and should also look at surrender as doing what is most inspiring, because that way I'll probably surrender more ultimately. Like if I was on that traveling party and I had something else to eat besides peanuts and raisins, well, I'd probably distribute more books. I think. Wouldn't you? Probably feel a lot better. So, I could tell you many crazy things we did that we surrendered to, but could be another show. Okay? You want to hear one more crazy thing? What was a real crazy thing we did? Anyway, you get the picture. Yes?
In one sense, we do everyday practice surrendering to the holy name, to Japa, to 16 rounds. It's definitely a surrender to do it.
Right.
And then once
Mana
you've
saying
done that,
we're surrendering to 16 rounds. Yeah, we may not want to do it. Yeah.
and once you've done that, how you spend the rest of the day, you're probably going to be able to serve Krishna best according to your nature.
Yeah. So Mana saying if you surrender to your 16 rounds, then you'll have the inspiration and the energy to serve Krishna best according to your nature. So that's true. I mean, obviously there's certain things we have to surrender to. You can't get around it. But in terms of service and surrendering to service, you can get around certain things.
Some people might say, after hearing what you just said, well, I really don't feel like chanting every day. It's not my nature. Kirtan's my thing, but Japa, forget that.
I don't feel like chanting every day. Kirtan's my thing. So, very good point. Now we're going to say something else, which I may have said last week, but I'll say it this week because maybe all of you weren't here. But some people ask, why do we chant a fixed number of rounds? It's a big thing, especially if you really like kirtan and you don't like japa so much, or you're want to be more spontaneous in your bhakti. So in the Jaiva Dharma it says we chant a fixed number of rounds to see if our chanting is increasing or decreasing. So it's a barometer. Okay, I want to maintain a certain level of relationship with Krishna, and this is how I view it. I also mentioned last week it's an aspect of commitment in a relationship. Just like in my family, we have a meal every night at 6 because it's the only time we can be together eating. So we all commit to that. So if anyone doesn't show up, then it's interference within it's disrespectful to the relationship. So chanting a fixed number of rounds is a commitment to Krishna, that Krishna, I will be there for you 4 rounds a day, 8 rounds a day, 16 rounds a day, 25 rounds a day, 32, 64, whatever it is. I will be there for you every day. So we can't get around that because that's part of the relationship. And of course if Krishna's in front of you asking you, do this is your duty, or your spiritual master is asking you, do this, your duty. You might talk to him about it and say, well, Guru Maharaj, it's not really my nature, I don't know about that. But ultimately, if he wants you to do it, then you must do it. There's a story, maybe you've heard, that in 1976, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was in charge of a party of, 80, 100, 120 men who had many, many buses. The one problem was that although they were very successful in bringing in new people to Krishna consciousness and distributing more books than any temple in America, I think any zone of temples, any group of temples in America, maybe the world, they were so inspired traveling with the sannyasis that when the brahmacharis would come to the temples, they would speak to all the other brahmacharis and say, why don't you come with us? This is the real life and soul. You're a brahmachari, you should be with the sannyasis. In the temples, there's so many married couples, it's not really good for you. So a lot of the brahmacharis from the temples were leaving the temples. So in Mayapur, they came to Prabhupada and they complained. And so Prabhupada spoke to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and he was feeling very bad that everyone had turned against him because they felt like it was his plan to just take devotees. So he was very upset, and he just said, in desperation, he wasn't serious, he just said, maybe I should go to China. And he was just really upset, maybe I should just leave America forever and go to some place where there are no devotees and I won't bother anybody. So the next morning he called Tamal Krishna Maharaj to see him. Srila Prabhupada called Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And so Prabhupada said, you mentioned going to China. And he said, yeah, it was just a figure of speech. And Prabhupada said, no, I want you to go to China. And he didn't want to go to China at all, because he had this huge party. And he was saying, Prabhupada, we're distributing more books than anybody. We've made so many devotees. He was just going on. And Prabhupada said, I want you to go to China. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was refusing. He just couldn't accept it. And then Prabhupada said, then I take away all your men, all your buses. You have no service. And you either stay here in Mayapur and just chant Hare Krishna, or you go to China. So then he realized, at a certain point he came to a sense and he realized, I am a disciple And Prabhupada owns everything. Everything I have is his, and if this is what he wants me to do, then why am I fighting him? I should just do it. So then he finally did it. So, there's those situations in which, to say, well, Prabhupada, it's not my nature to go to China. That would not be the right thing to say. And also, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was a sannyasi, and sannyasis are expected to do whatever. But still, I would say, at the same time, it doesn't mean that when he goes to China, he'll be giving up his nature to serve Krishna in a particular way. Our nature is always there. So we'll always tend to serve Krishna according to that nature, although some of us may be a little more fearful to identify with that nature, acknowledge it and go with it because we think we're not being surrendered. But my point is that it's not necessarily true. It may be that you're more surrendered by doing that. At least it's something to think about. So there are more questions. Okay, Kirtan Das says, that is definitely correct. Sometimes I chant and I feel like it's a task. But by Prabhupada's mercy, I have realized the greatness of chanting, and it's good for my soul. Yes, so there's certain aspects of devotional service, of bhakti, we have to do. And like I was saying, we don't wait till it's spontaneous. Many of these things are forced, but they're principles. So that's, part of the process of surrender is to follow certain principles of bhakti. You can't avoid that and expect to get the results. But within the realm of service, there are so many aspects of service that we can do, and even within a particular order, like the spiritual master may say, we should distribute books, or we should publish books. And there's so many things you can do within that instruction. You may even write books. You may be a business person and decide to distribute books in unique ways that no one's ever done before. Or you may be involved in painting and publication, and inspiring others to distribute books. Yes?
Could you say, for instance, like you were saying the story of Tamal Krishna Maharaj going to China, in a sense his nature was to be a powerful preacher, wherever he went. And so Prabhupada was engaging him. He saw that, and he saw he really would like to bring somebody to China and start the movement there. So, when we're, in a sense, it's the surrender is not so much, going against our nature. It's not being attached to the results or the fruits of our actions. It's that we do our service, it's for Krishna, and wherever we are, in whatever circumstance, we're doing that service. It kind of brings two things together, that we're engaged according to our duty, but we're surrendered in the sense that we're not attached whether I'm preaching in China or I'm preaching in Radha Damodar.
Yeah, so Manu's saying part of the surrender is even if we're engaged in our nature, we're detached to the degree that whether we're serving in one place or another, or with who or with another, our surrender is, this is our service, we should do it. Or in situations that are difficult, that's another thing. Obstacles. Detachment is, of course, an essential aspect of bhakti. And he's saying here, so, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was a powerful preacher, and Prabhupada put him and gave him an incredible service to develop that country. And he was detached enough to be able to do it. And so we always have to be detached. That's part of the process of surrender. If we, of course you could say, well, if I'm doing something that really inspires me, I like it, then I could become attached, very attached. No, it's okay to be attached to the service. You just be detached from Maya. And there are aspects to that service that could be Maya. And you'll know what they are when you do them, or you'll know what they are before you do them. But detachment is, one aspect of detachment, which is fundamental, is just being fixed in consciousness that I'm not meant to enjoy this. Even though it's enjoyable, I'm not meant to be the enjoyer of it. I enjoy doing. What does it mean? I enjoy this service. Well, it really means I enjoy doing this service for Krishna, because I may not enjoy this service if it wasn't for Krishna. I was in Orlando this weekend, and Srikram Swami was talking about love, and he was saying, actually, it's really difficult to love ourselves, because we're not really that lovable. He said, Prabhupada is much more lovable than we are, and Krishna is obviously more lovable than we are. So they're really the objects of love. So our service is really geared towards Krishna, And loving Krishna, so when we say, I love my service, we love it because we love to do that service for Krishna. And I mean, we're lovable in a sense, but in the ultimate sense, Krishna is the most lovable. Okay, there are other questions here. An example was a devotee that I knew who was very shy and found it hard to approach strangers. This devotee nevertheless tried book distribution and managed to overcome that fear. Yes, that's very good. I think there's a lot of examples like that. And of course, when you're living as a brahmachari in a temple, that's not really the time, on the second day you're there and say, well, I only play guitar for Krishna. Brahmachari, being a brahmachari means you're a menial servant, you do everything. And that's your training, that's your boot camp. That's when you learn what, to do the needful, what surrender means. And perhaps you want to live your entire life that way. You say, I'll live as a brahmachari in a temple. I'll take sannyas. I'll be on the front line. I'll always be the fully surrendered, detached, renounced person. And, we can never put that down. That's glorious. And we've all of us who've lived in temples, we've all gone through that. And those are some of the glorious days of our life when that was a kind of surrender that we did and the kind of surrender we needed to do. And at the same time, I'm making the point that for many devotees, that kind of surrender was a time in their life. It was an ashram in their life. And it was not something that they could maintain throughout their life, that level, without the mature level of bhakti. And also, I think, being motivated and inspired also means coming more in touch with, what is the greatest gift I can give to Krishna? What is the greatest way I can serve him? And, you can look at so many devotees who became inspired to do some wonderful project. It was in their heart. It just came out. They couldn't hold it in. They went to another country. They started a temple and started some mission. And you look at Food for Life in Vrindavan, what he did, it was all, an inspiration. So, if you look at any great project, there was great inspiration behind that. So the point is, we don't want to restrict devotees in the name of you're not surrendered from living out their inspiration to do wonderful service for Krishna. When I was in Los Angeles, in 1976, Prabhupada visited like 6 or 7 departments: the art department, the book publication department, the spiritual sky, the book warehouse, and the Golden Avatar recording studios. And every time he would go to one of these places, he would say, paint for Krishna. Then he would go to the next place. Produce books for Krishna. Then he would go to the studio. Sing for Krishna. Then he would go to spiritual sky. Do business for Krishna. Then he would go to the book warehouse. Distribute books for Krishna. So his whole point was somehow be engaged fully in Krishna's service. So I'm kind of making this point in consideration of where most of us are at. If we were all 100% fully conditioned souls, this wouldn't be appropriate, because we would, it would not be entirely inappropriate, but we would be so surrendered and so happy doing anything in Krishna's service. We'd be totally inspired, and we inspire the world to do the same. But at the same time, it's like this. You pack your bags, right? You go on a trip and you pack your bags. You put in, the things you need. You go on the airplane, you get off, you pick up your bag, you get to the hotel and you find out, wow, this is not my bag. I thought it was. It looks just like the other bag. And you open it up, and let's say in my case, it's women's clothes. So I think, well, it's all I have. I'll dress like a woman. Is that a good idea? No, it's not a good idea. I think it's the wrong bag. I can't live out of this bag. So the point is, a lot of us do that in our life. We're trying to be somebody else, live out of somebody else's bag, because so-and-so does this and so-and-so does that, and therefore I should do it. That may not be the gift Krishna gives you. It may not be the nature you have. So you have to live out of your own bag. You don't, I'm not going to wear a woman's dress and high heel shoes because I have the wrong bag. So God gives us all a bag of qualities, of abilities. And why does he give them to us? Because he wants us to use them for him. It's glorious. Many devotees go out of book distribution and they're not good. And it's glorious that they'll go out just to please their spiritual master. The other devotees are distributing 20 or 30 or 40 books and they're distributing 6. So that's also glorious if they feel that inspiration so strongly that they want to please their spiritual master, and it's not their nature to be to be extroverted with people and so on and so forth. But as you say, sometimes they do become that way. So I just want to balance it out because the other side is always spoken so strongly of. Just surrender, Prabhu, and sometimes that surrender is not. It's not always surrender. So now, it's 9:15. I went overtime. So, does anybody have any comments or questions before we end this session? Anyway, I'm going to do a whole course on this because I have a deep commitment or a deep belief that we all need to be more connected to what inspires us, and that will create a different kind of Hare Krishna movement. Thousands of extremely inspired people. I see often people who lived in the temple were really restricted, and they move outside the temple, they do something, and it amazes everybody because they weren't doing much in the temple. But the reason they weren't doing much in the temple is because there was only 2 or 3 services to do, and they really didn't do any of those well, so everybody thought they're not really qualified people. And then they go outside and go with their abilities and inspiration, and they come back and they tell us what they've done, and sometimes it's difficult to believe. How could you do that? I didn't think you had the ability. It was just we didn't have the opportunity for them. So, okay. All right. So I thank you all for watching, and I will be back next Tuesday. Same time, same place, same station, Hare Krishna, and we'll see you next week.